Ever since the Horus heresy, the Imperium of Man has been assailed by the myriad warbands of the Chaos Space Marines. Many Chaos Lords have risen to glory and infamy for their actions in prosecuting the Long War. However, some names have been legends amongst the followers of the ruinous powers for over 10,000 years. Mighty warriors during the Great Crusade made the ultimate champions of chaos. Today, we look at one such individual, an apothecary driven to vile and twisted experimentation, responsible for endless cloning and mutation amongst the traitor legions. This is the tale of the Primogenitor, Fabius Bile, apothecary of the Emperor's Children. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. Fabius Bile was born on Europa, a frozen moon of Jupiter in the Sol system. He was brought into the 3rd Legion Astartes, the Emperor's Children, long before the Primarch Fulgrim was discovered on Kamos. Unbeknownst to him, however, he was infected with something now known as the Blight. Previously, a large portion of the Emperor's Children's stored gene seed had been attacked and assumedly damaged by Selenar gene cults, and a lot of the remainder was struck with the aforementioned Blight virus. This left the Legion teetering near to extinction, and whilst new Astartes were rushed to the front in order to replenish it, it was unknown as to whether they were also infected. Fabius was one of said new recruits, and in his role as apothecary, he was tasked with recovering the gene seed of those who fell in battle. However, the Blight rendered all infected gene seed unusable, and would also cause tumours or mutations in some Astartes. It was undetectable and incurable, and it became Fabius's obsession. When not in the theatre of war, the apothecary tirelessly searched for a way to detect and possibly even cure his brothers. As the 3rd Legion strove always for perfection, it is perhaps little surprise that Fabius eventually devised a test for the Blight, and so he was able to discover those legionaries who had become infected, including, eventually, himself. The infected Astartes willingly consented to their own execution, holding true to their idealist quest for perfection. But Fabius would not be put down. He was far too significant, too necessary to simply be killed off. Thus, he switched his own genetic sample with that of another, saving his infected skin at the cost of a pure brother. He continued his research, searching for a cure for the Blight, prolonging his life using the gene seed of his fallen brothers, until Fulgrim was finally discovered by the Imperium and reunited with his sons. With the Legion and its Primarch together once more, Fabius hoped that a cure for the Blight would soon be imminent. He was to be proven so sorely wrong. Rather than fix any lingering remnants of the old gene pool, a new, pure one was implemented to restore the Emperor's Children. This left Fabius with no way to restore himself, as tumours racked his organs, forcing himself to rely on mechanics to sustain his existence. This did not stop his work, however. Before the drop site massacre, he altered the nervous systems of the traitor legionaries to convert pain to pleasure, and began working on a new set of gene organs that would eventually create the Noise Marines, using knowledge garnered from the Leia, who had been conquered by the 3rd Legion during the Great Crusade. Yet he could not save himself. By the time of Istvan V and Fulgrim's possession by a Slaneshi greater demon, his estimations gave him no more than a year to live. With no alternatives remaining, he confessed his crimes and mutations to the demon Fulgrim, praying both that he would not be killed and that his Primarch would be able to save his life. He was indeed spared from death and given fresh life that has sustained him through to today, but the means by which this came to pass are unknown. I doubt possession, for a reason that I'll cover later, but it is possible that the demon within Fulgrim or Slanesh itself was so impressed by Bile's work that they wished him to continue, thus granting him newfound longevity. It is also worth noting that at this time Bile was unaware of Fulgrim's possession, as he was later involved in the plot by Lucius to exorcise it. Bile was borderline unique amongst the traitorous parts of the Emperor's Children. He did not fall like his brothers and father into the arms of Slanesh, letting pleasure and the quest for it overwhelm him. Rather, he maintained his scientific goals abandoning his experimentation on the blight and taking his research into the field of genetic modification. His ultimate goal was to find and then utilize the knowledge on the creation of the Astartes themselves, just as the Emperor had once done. Unlike the Lord of Mankind, however, Fabius was very open about using forbidden and dark technology in order to achieve this goal. Likely the Emperor did too, he just wasn't so open about it. During the early stages of the Horus heresy, his progress was likely slow, but his actions on Terra did show he was getting somewhere, even if not with his ultimate goal. During this final engagement of the war, the Third Legion were largely not present at the Imperial Palace. Instead, they ravaged the civilian districts in the Administratum, hoping that by killing off this crucial cog in the Imperial machine, they could cripple the Imperium even if the traitors lost, which of course they did. Millions were killed, and just as many were captured and brought to Bile. Their bodies were broken down by the apothecary, distilled into stimulants and other drugs that sent the legions spiraling further into depravity. Bile also conducted many surgeries upon his brothers, ensuring that only the greatest excess and extravagance would hold any pleasure for them, shepherding them into Slanesh's arms. But he never underwent them himself, preferring to stay focused on his goals. With Horus defeated, the traitor legions fled to the Warp and the Eye of Terror. Fabius, however, left before the battle for Terra was even over, taking his most gifted understudies to offer his services to the galaxy. In return, he plundered vast amounts of information and relics, as well as prisoners to use as test subjects. Whilst his actions often horrified his benefactors, Bile's work was nothing short of exemplary. He could transform a simple PDF trooper into a monstrously powerful super soldier, though I doubt it was Astartes level, and he had also perfected the art of cloning, which allowed him to mobilize hundreds or even thousands of these warriors, known as his new men. Despite his head start, however, he could not outrun the vengeance of the Loyalists and the brutality of the Scouring. The Salamanders tracked him down on the planet of Arden 9, and though he killed a dozen of them himself, he was forced to flee as his precious machinery was dismantled and destroyed. He found his way to the Eye of Terror, though by skill or chance is unknown, continuing his work in the meantime on his surviving acolytes. Eventually, he was led by some dark power to a former Eldar world now defiled by the Eye, known as a Crone world. From there, he re-established himself, selling his services equally amongst the traitor legions whilst never committing to any of them. As such, Fabius Bile became the flesh-manipulating spider at the heart of a toxic genetic web that has infected the galaxy, the Primogenitor of the new Chaos Space Marines. Bile was one of very few apothecaries left amongst the traitors, which meant his knowledge of the progenoid glands and gene seed was nothing short of invaluable in keeping the Chaos forces topped upon numbers. His cloning abilities were also extremely useful to the traitor armies, as were his skills in genetic modification. With all this combined, he could take a handful of captured slaves, turn them into mighty warriors far beyond the average human, and then replicate them en masse, as well as refill the numbers of Astartes through their harvested progenoids or simply by cloning. However, he was not content with mere Astartes. Oh, no. He wanted more. Whether by his command or not, the Emperor's children assaulted Malium, the new home of the Sons of Horus Legion, stealing the body of the War Master from the fortress of Lupercalios and bringing it to Bile, or Bile rendezvoused with them, whichever it is irrelevant here, on the planet of Harmony. Bile then took Horus's body into his care, cloning and resurrecting him whilst using his Primarch DNA to begin creating new versions of the other 19 Primarchs. Whilst this could have simply been a power grab for Bile, he planned to use Horus Reborn as a way to win over, or at least strike a deal, with Ezekiel Abaddon. This backfired horribly, however, as his flagship, the Flesh Market, was attacked by Abaddon's newly formed Black Legion. The Emperor's children were crushed, the adolescent Primarch clones were destroyed, and Horus Reborn was slain by Abaddon. Suffice it to say that from that day onwards, the new War Master and the Primogenitor have never got on all that well. From then on, Bile abandoned the traitors entirely, becoming a mercenary of sorts. He will always pursue his own agenda first, even under the illusion of helping others. He has even cloned himself numerous times, ensuring his influence spreads and his knowledge increases many times faster than it would under normal circumstances. It also means that shutting him down is borderline impossible, as every clone and lab will have to be destroyed along with the Primogenitor himself to put his sadistic operation to an end. Despite Bile's extraordinary talents, there is one group who puts him to shame when it comes to manipulating the flesh, the homunculus covens of the Dark Eldar. The homunculi are truly the greatest artisans of the body, inflicting unimaginable torture and torment upon the luckless individuals who fall into their clutches. They are responsible for the racks, grotesques, and scourges who often join a Comorite warband in their real space raids. During the 37th millennium, Bile and a warband of Emperor's children were captured by the Dark Eldar and brought to Comorra. Somehow, the Coven of the 13 Scars had gotten wind of Bile's deeds. The human was improvising at best, far behind their own supernatural skills, but they were sufficiently impressed by the tortures he had inflicted. In an event unheard of before or since, the homunculi opened their doors and welcomed the Mon-Kai to their home as their guest rather than victim. There, Fabius aided the Coven in creating the Tower of Flesh. His elixirs and runes ensured that the tower, built from those who had wronged the Coven, would remain standing indefinitely, blood dripping from the walls of flesh. With the tower completed, Bile was permitted to study under the homunculi for a time. The knowledge he gained was but the tip of the iceberg of the Coven's power, but it is still an honour that Bile appreciates greatly and that is unique to him under the lesser races. This is why I suspect Bile was not sustained through possession. A Slaaneshi demon in the heart of Comorra would have almost certainly attacked the Dark Eldar rather than simply leave, and a demon in the Dark City would likely have been detectable to those who fight so hard to spare their souls from she who thirsts. Bile's name is cursed upon hundreds of worlds, but perhaps none more so than Baal, home of the Blood Angels chapter. After an event known as the Blood Angels Civil War, where a traitor inquisitor tried to turn the Blood Angels to chaos through claims of a reincarnated Sanguinius, Lord Commander Dante gathered his chapter and its successors to Baal. What had once been the Ninth Legion was on the verge of extinction, and as a result their home would be at grave risk should it be attacked by Chaos or the nearby Tyranid Hive Fleet. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Dante, his chapter's apothecaries were working to address the issue in a different way, cloning the surviving Blood Angels to refill the chapter numbers quickly. Dante had expressly forbidden this, but Chief Apothecary Jesus carried on anyway, egged on by a secret acolyte of Bile's. This culminated in Fabius, masquerading as a senior magos of the Ordos Biologis, being invited to Baal in order to aid the cloning process. The cloning failed, instead creating the psychotic blood fiends, mutant marines already lost to the red thirst that lay within the Blood Angels' gene seed and further modified by Bile's dark technology. They grew in power as they fed on blood, and were able to escape Jesus' laboratories and rampage through the fortress monastery. This allowed Bile to smuggle out a vial containing not only all the blood of former sanguinary priests, the equivalent to Blood Angels apothecaries, but also of Sanguinius himself. The Primogenitor fled as the Blood Angels fought to secure their home from the Blood Fiends, but he could not hide from the Sons of the Angel for very long. Hunted by Sergeant Rayfin and his allies in the successor chapter The Flesh Tearers, Bile was traced to a world led by a Magos he had consorted with whilst pretending to be the Magos Biologis. After forcing the other Magos to give up the information, the Blood Angels Alliance travelled to the Ghoul Stars, a region almost beyond the light of the Astronomicon, populated by dead or haunted worlds. Within was the planet of Dynakis V, a world infected by the Tyranids and yet not entirely consumed by the Hive Mind's warriors. Unbeknownst to the Blood Angels, the truth was that Bile had been able to capture a zoanthrope, manipulating the creature's pheromones in order to throw off the Tyranids and hide his lab. The Astartes ventured down to Dynachus 5 to find Fabius using a submarine, but were attacked en route by giant Tyranid creatures. Sergeant Raphan was separated from his brothers, assumedly sucked through a hull breach, and ended up seemingly washed up near Bile's lab. The Primogenitor's servants retrieved Raphan, who awoke strapped to an experimental table with a maggot in his body, as he was granted an audience with Bile himself. Once Raphan was in his presence, Bile did what every good evil villain does, and explained his entire plan. Using the blood of Sanguinius he recovered from Bile, which was one of the purest blood samples in relation to the Emperor's own DNA, he would replicate the gene codes for the Lord of Mankind himself. He would create a clone Emperor, with the physical and psychic attributes of the true Emperor, but without his morality and under Bile's command. He had been harvesting Astartes' body parts for centuries beforehand to further this endeavour, but the angel's blood was still a huge leap forward. Somehow, despite his injuries and restraints, the unarmed Raphan attacked Bile and tore out his throat with his teeth, killing him. Yet this was simply a clone, and so the Primogenitor still lived. Not that Raphan knew it at the time. The truth came out when the still imprisoned Raphan was taken to an arena and saw Bile in the audience, though he was able to ally with a Doom Eagle's marine in order to incite an uprising. Meanwhile, his brothers had been able to fend off the Tyranids in the submarine and attack the lab complex, led by Sergeant Knox of the Flesh Terrors. Following a psychic signal detected by their librarian, they found and killed a zoanthrope that was warding off the other Tyranids. Between the uprising and the assault, Bile died at least 4 times, or at least a clone did. Whilst the true Bile had never been on Dynachus 5 at all, probably still hiding away on his crone world, the Blood Angels were able to recover the phial of Sanguinius' blood, though the clone they took it from told them that Bile had already extracted everything there was to learn from it. Raphan was then forced to consume the blood in order to either defeat said clone or simply his warriors by injecting it into himself and gaining a portion of the angel's power. With their objective complete, the Astartes relayed out by teleportation and returned home. Their actions had not only delayed the Emperor project, but had also destroyed the lab on Dynachus 5 by killing the zoanthrope and alerting the Tyranids to their presence. Bile's actions since this are unknown. He has been offered vengeance on the Blood Angels by a demon prince or greater demon of some kind, but this offer is neither confirmed accepted or rejected, at least right now. One presumes he is simply hard at work on the Emperor project on his home, and if he should succeed, then it will be a dark time indeed for humanity, as their Lord is reborn with the purpose of destroying them. So ends the tale of Fabius Bile. From a frozen moon at the heart of the Imperium, he has been on quite the journey, or at least his clones have. Gifted with the knowledge of the homunculus covens and the DNA code for the Emperor himself, it is plausible to think he could be the one to usurp Abaddon if the 13th Black Crusade should fail. Whatever the case, his is a name reviled on countless planets by all races, but that will not bother the Primogenitor. I hope you've enjoyed our bonus episode to Champions of Chaos, our 40k Stories mini-series looking into the mightiest of the Ruinous Power's servants. Next time, well, we've touched on the Blood Angels in this episode, and I think we're going to revisit them. I hope you'll be able to join me next time. Thank you for watching. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.